Thanks for joining us. We are in the process of unpacking a number of parts of the vision that we feel that the Lord has given us for our church here in Toronto. And I'm here with Steve and Sandra Long, senior leaders of the church here, who are also vice presidents for Catch the Fire World, which is our family of churches that we're a part of. And one of the pieces of our vision particularly pertains to our role within that family of churches. And I'll just read it out here, and then let's take a few minutes and chat that through. It says this: we are pioneers and standard bearers within our wider movement, leading and supporting the expansion and excellence of our global family. Why don't you guys just give a snapshot of history for those that are not really familiar with Catch the Fire World and the whole movement, really?
Well, I can begin by going back to the founding of our church. Started as being a part of a network called the Vineyard. And so this church's original name was Toronto Airport Vineyard Christian Fellowship. And in the early stages of the revival, the Vineyard denomination felt that this church was redefining all the churches a little too much. And so the leader, John Wimber, had a vision from the Lord, a dream from the Lord to say, you need to bless these guys to be themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And so he came and he blessed us. I was at the meeting. I think the world saw it as a divorce, but I was at the meeting. If it was a divorce, we're eating donuts and drinking coffee and telling God stories. Like it was a shocking kind of meeting, but all of a sudden we're no longer part of this network. And John and Carol were thinking, okay, well, who do we join? Because we want to be under the covering of some other group. We want to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And as John was contemplating that, about 30 pastors, mostly in Ontario, all pastors and churches that had been touched by this church and by the outpouring of the Holy Spirit, the Toronto blessing that had taken place here, they sort of ganged up on John at a surprise meeting. They knew about it, John didn't. And they said, we want you to start a new network of churches, and whatever you call it, we're in. And so John, as he prayed about it, felt the Holy Spirit say, yes, you need to do that. And so that network is called Partners in Harvest. Very low relationships, I shouldn't say low relationships, low commitment. It was independent churches where we're loving each other, caring for each other, but not really family, more like cousins, if I can say it like that. And then one of our pastors from this church, Duncan and Kate Smith, who were on our staff and at that time were leading our youth and young adults, they felt the Holy Spirit say to go and be church planters in Raleigh, North Carolina. And Duncan's role on our team was that he was the head of Catch the Fire Ministries, which was all the missions things that we were doing. It was the one-week schools that we were doing in 50 nations around the world. And so when Duncan went to Raleigh, he's got to choose a name, and he can't be called Toronto Airport Christian Fellowship, which was our next name, just dropped the word Vineyard. And because he was doing Catch the Fire Ministries, he said, can I call my church Catch the Fire? And when he called the name, that Raleigh church Catch the Fire, it was like, oh my goodness, that's probably the better name than Toronto Airport. We're known as a church where you can come and catch the fire of the Holy Spirit. So we became Catch the Fire Toronto, and quickly 3 or 4 other churches, Catch the Fire London started, Catch the Fire Reykjavik in Iceland started, Catch the Fire Oslo in Norway started. And all of a sudden, we're a little mini network of Catch the Fire branded churches, all had the same name within Partners in Harvest. And as time grew, both groups grew, and the Catch the Fire churches got to around 30. And then a couple of years ago, John and Carol really felt from the Lord that we needed to integrate these 2 groups together, bring the best of both together. And so that was a fairly traumatic day when John sent this email out to everybody to say, this is what we're going to do. In hindsight, John was absolutely right. It was a profound strategic change. And so today, we're part of a network of churches that are called Catch the Fire Partners. The covering organization is called Catch the Fire World. 150-ish churches, some still in process. And we're all around the world now.
Yeah.
And then there's another larger network of unaffiliated pastors. I shouldn't say unaffiliated. They could be Pentecostal, Baptist, they could be anything. And so we have a side organization called Leaders Alliance. And Sandra and I are part of the leadership team. Ben, you're part of the leadership team for Catch the Fire World of giving apostolic leadership. And I would say that the fact that we've hosted a revival, the fact that we, as of now, are still the largest of all those churches, means that we're a resource. And this is a great privilege that we have to influence other churches, to share the values that God's done here, to the staffing that we have the larger the staff you have, the more expertise you have. And so we're able to be a resource and a help to many other churches. Ben, I'm going to turn it to you. You oversee communications.
Right.
So how do you help all these other churches around the world?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually, like you said, it's an amazing privilege for us to be able to really help the mission of these local churches in some far-flung places, even places that we can't really talk about because the churches need to remain underground because of the restrictions that the government may place. And I think that is so exciting that we have the opportunity to serve and impact them. And so when it comes to communications, we are able to, just offer them some of our expertise, some of the efficiencies of scale, as it were. And one of the words I love in this statement is where it talks about being pioneers and standard bearers. And pioneer can be a bit of a romantic word, can't it? You think, yes, I want to be a pioneer. Well, the real pioneers, who pioneered into new territory in the world, they endured some pretty extreme circumstances. And I think God has gifted us with this incredible opportunity to push, to test, to try new things, to explore areas and break new ground that the rest of our church family, these other churches around the world and other leaders around the world get to benefit from and be blessed by what we're doing as one of the pioneers in the movement.
So Ben, it used to be that every church leader, Iceland, Norway, all spoke English, and that was our language.
Right.
That's not it anymore. How many languages do we have to communicate in?
Oh gosh, I think we have about 30 different languages within the movement, and that's a challenge. It's technically a challenge for us, but what a beautiful challenge. We've talked a bit about multiculturalism and how we celebrate that in Toronto, and how much more so within our movement, where we have people in Japan and Iceland and Africa and France and Brazil and just all over the place. That's such an amazing challenge and beautiful to come together as a global family.
Yeah, Sandra and I get to host once every 3 months a pastors gathering, a leaders gathering for all the leaders around the world, and we're the hosts, and we have 2 back-to-back. And so the first one for us was, I think, 6 a.m., and it was 7 p.m. Japan time, Tokyo time. And so we're talking in English, Japanese translator, and then Chinese translation for Asia, that biggest area. And then the next meeting we had is for Europe and North America, and it was Portuguese, and we've had German sometimes. It's just a fun meeting when it's such an international thing. And if I can be humble, almost all those churches look to us.
They do.
Of what God's done here, and they're saying, as you said, you're pioneers. What you have, we'd like to partner. We'd like to sample. We'd like to lean on.
Yeah.
And it's a great privilege that God's given to us as a church to be able to do that.
A good example of that is we've worked really hard on our safeguarding policies and plan to protect, we call it, here, for the way that we look after vulnerable adults and children. And that's been a lot of hard work, a lot of investment financially has gone into that, so that we can really set a high standard for the way that we care for people. That is a beautiful blessing when we can then help to train and educate the other leaders in our movement so that they can also have those same kind of high standards in their local churches that might otherwise not be able to develop those same kind of practices themselves.
And I just want to say, too, that I have learned so much from other nations. Steve and I will be on these meetings with, for instance, Japan, the leaders there, and they'll be telling me things, and I'm like, oh, I've never even thought about that. We have the opportunity to learn from each other in this season, and I think that's where we're going, so it's beautiful.
Yeah, it is beautiful to learn from one another. I love that too. So it's exciting for us to think about the future, how we can continue to pioneer as a church, continue to push into the new things that God has for us, and practical, technological things that we can do to continue to be pioneers and standard bearers within the family and help the rest of the family.
That's the goal.